In this case, I would have, you know where I showed you about where the snipers would be on the back left of the flag? I would have guys on the other end sitting behind a hill waiting for, like, your enemy team captures your flag and they're on their way back with it. Just when they're about to cap, you send in those guys and they take the flag where they can't score. Or even kill the guy and return your own flag. Either way, you come out ahead because they're not expecting somebody to be sitting there at their own base, hidden, waiting for the right moment to attack. And that's another thing, is timing is very important. You can also save up attacks and hit somebody with a big attack at the right moment. Not at the end of battle, but just when it would hurt them the most and cripple them. Now there's another thing, I'm going to quote Sun Tzu again. Know your enemy, you must become your enemy. Now when I was talking earlier about how much information you know about your enemy, figuring out what their strategy is, there's also an aspect of where you have to know what your enemy knows about you. And that's something you wouldn't think you can alter, but you can actually affect what the enemy knows about you by feeding them misinformation, which is how the government has done in past wars with spies. It also works in poker. Like if you get a good card, you act like you got a bad card for just a second, act like you let it slip, and your enemy thinks that they've found out some information about you, which is actually bad information. They'll bet big, and then you'll gain big. Now, if you want to combine those two things, you combine the timing and the misinformation. Like I was saying before about having your snipers up there in the top left, you have them fire at your enemies or have them come up where they're able to be seen. So the enemy thinks that they've gotten some information about you and they're going to like focus their attention on the top left. Now while they're at the top left, you have your reserve guys come in from the top right where they're not being seen, grab the flag and get away where they're looking the opposite direction. You cause a distraction. Now Sun Tzu also said something, I really like this. Build your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across. That means you create an opening for your enemies in defeat so that they can think that they've found a way out, and it's actually a trap. Now what this means, this is how it applies to Fallen Empire legions and tribes, for example, capture the flag. You get into situations in Fallen Empire legions a lot because people go so fast that you get into a stalemate where both of your teams have flags and everybody's going around the outside edge and nobody can capture the flag because both teams have their flags out of the base. So what I do a lot of times, I'll tell my team to give up the flag, and I'll have guys go to the enemy base like in between where the flag capper is and where the base is, because he's going to have to return the flag as soon as that flag gets back. So you know in advance what he's going to do and where he's going to be. You have guys there waiting for it to happen, and when he comes back to return his flag, everybody focuses their chain gun fire on him and kills him. You take the flag, you return your flag, and you've just gotten victory because you've built your enemy a golden bridge to retreat across, basically is what that means. He thought he had an opportunity to score, and you turned it into an opportunity for you to score. The next thing I want to talk about is from The Matrix. If you remember the fight scene where Morpheus and Neo, he just got all these kung fu fighting moves downloaded into his brain. He's fighting Morpheus in the kung fu room or whatever, and he says you can't break the rules, but some can be bent. Fallen Empire Legion allows you to throw your flag outside of the area to buy some more time to return your flag before they can capture it. So a lot of times if somebody's about to have their flag capped, they'll just run in and grab the enemy flag, and they don't have enough health to get all the way back home, so they'll just go past their enemy base just a little bit and throw it out of bounds, and the flag will have like 20 seconds or so. It'll just sit out of bounds where nobody can touch it. So that's a way you can kind of bend the rules. Now in Tribes 2 there was a thing where you don't have any weapons that can one-shot somebody. If you use a sniper rifle, the laser rifle, shoot somebody in the head, it won't kill them, but they'll have just a little bit of health left. So what we used to do, we used to catch somebody standing still, like another sniper on a hill, and you would shoot a disc at them, an explosive disc. And while this disc is traveling, because it moves fairly slow, you wait till it just gets to them, and then you shoot them in the head with a sniper rifle, and then the disc explodes at the same time, simultaneously. You one-shot them that way. You're bending the rules, but it's still legal. I also used to do this by throwing grenades or throwing a mine or a grenade and then shoot them with a disc, and it explodes and does the damage of both. There's also a part in Ender's game where the guys that are making Ender go through all these different trials and trying to prove himself to be a good general, they try to overwhelm him and try to just wear him down. And they eventually put 2 armies against his 1 army of guys that are just brand new soldiers. So what makes Ender so awesome is that he doesn't accept defeat. Even though he knows he can't kill all of his enemies, he decides to maneuver most of his army in a place where it makes these other 2 armies get away from their gate. So he sends 5 guys to the enemy gate to perform the victory ritual I was talking about, where they put their forehead helmets on the thing. And it ended the game even though he hadn't killed any enemies yet. All of his enemies are still alive, which nobody ever heard of. Like, how did you just win the game when you never killed anybody? And they had to change the rules because of it, because he bent the rules, and he always figures out a way to win, no matter what you do. The game lasted like 5 minutes. It was like it was over. And to make it even better, he just pretty much rubbed it in their faces. He says, you put 2 armies against me and a bunch of noobs, and that's the best you can do. He's just pure badass. So that's some examples of bending the rules. There's another thing I learned from Ender's game where Ender is like a little kid and he gets attacked by a group of guys, and he's in a situation where he wants to win the fight, but he doesn't want them to ever fight him again because you don't want somebody to keep coming back. We did this in Hiroshima, dropping the nuke on them. We never expect Japan to attack us now because they got nuked. They understood that we're serious and we're not going to be fucked with. Ender did the same thing by kicking the main guy in the balls, knocks him on the ground, kicks him in the arm, goes around, kicks him on the other side, kicks him in the nose. And these kids kind of had an unspoken rule that you don't hurt somebody when they're already down. So by breaking this rule, he really emphasized his point of how serious he was. So he didn't win just that one fight, but he won all the other fights as well. Now the last thing I want to talk about of this huge epic series of Strategery. Old predictable strategies can be adapted to serve a different purpose. Now in Ender's game, for example, the old strategy was to have armies in formations. Now they did this back in the Revolutionary War, and America defeated Britain by using guerrilla warfare tactics, dividing guys into squadrons and groups and having them hide in trees and shoot from rocks. In Ender's game, formations is pretty much like a rectangular shape of guys, or like a pyramid, triangular shape, or like a diamond formation. There's all kind of different formations you'll see in armies and wars, fighter jets, for example. That was an old idea, and Ender came along and he defeated it by having his soldiers in small independent squads that used guerrilla warfare tactics, and they made them obsolete. He had all these guys that were thinking for themselves. He was having his little sub-commanders make decisions on their own based on what he's already told them. Later in the book, they changed the battle room so that there wasn't any stars. There was no cover. So like I said, Ender dealt with the situation by making his own army guys the stars. He had them all go into formation. Everybody else started doing what Ender had done and got out of the formation thing. They were all doing the same thing he was doing, so all of a sudden he hits them with an old strategy and they were not expecting it at all, and they couldn't deal with it because he was doing it in a different way. Using a formation in a room that had stars in it wouldn't be as effective, but having a room that didn't have any stars, suddenly it became useful. And my example of that would be the snipers, like I was saying earlier. Instead of having them in midfield, have them go behind your base and use the old strategy of sniping, which everybody now predicts people to be sniping because it's so worn out. But nobody predicts snipers to be behind your base shooting their flag defense. So that's all of my strategy that I have saved up. You pretty much can remember it by the type 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is old school, 2 is the countering the old school, 3 is the counter of the counter, and 4 is the truly genius, just random patterns of unpredictable, improvised, and adapted. If you ever remember in Matrix, when Neo and Morpheus were fighting in the Kung Fu room, he was analyzing his natural ability, not the ability of what they downloaded into his brain. He was like, adaptation, improvisation is very good. So that's what he was looking for. There's another quote by Sun Tzu which I really like. Pretend inferiority and encourage his arrogance. That was also in Karate Kid or something. Pretend you're weak when you're strong and encourage your enemy to think you're weak so that they come at you and then you hit them in the chin when you least expect it. Speed is the essence of war. Here's another one. Take advantage of the enemy's unpreparedness. Travel by unexpected routes and strike him where he's taken no precautions. It's exactly what my butterfly strategy does. It takes advantage of unexpected routes and where the enemy doesn't have any defenses, like behind their base. Who would put defenses behind their base? Nobody would expect that. And once they start doing it, once they figured you out, then you start coming from the front, or the side, or from all directions and have only one of them matter. Feinting and faking is very important. So hopefully that was informative, and you guys will have some information now that if you ever get in a situation, you'll not be overwhelmed and you'll be able to think for yourself and use this strategy and tactics to your advantage.